Welcome to State It for Tomorrow. It's a podcast where we bring in inspiring guests who use their passion and superpowers to shape the future. I'm Sandy Sharma, and we're here with Kevin Marcus. Kevin is a brilliant guy in every sense, right? We're going to talk about it a little bit, but he's the Chief Technology Officer and founder of Versium. He's going to tell us a lot more about himself. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
So, we're going to jump right into some rapid fire questions before we get into the passion, the purpose, and the superpower, which is the meat of the show. But we want the audience to kind of know some fun about you, right? What is your favorite type of coffee? Or are you even a coffee guy?
I don't drink coffee at all.
So then how do you stay fueled, bud?
So I got to tell you, Red Bull fixes that problem for me.
You know that one.
There you go. I appreciate that. You should try Noka. It's super healthy. But
so is Red Bull.
No, Red Bull still has the taurine and all that other crap.
Look, if you're a COVID particle, do you want to swim around in that? Probably not.
Do you have a favorite video game you've ever played?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I've got two actually, both from the same publisher.
Okay.
I love the Diablo series.
Whoa.
Yeah, and at least in Diablo 3, I got pretty crazy good. But I also, amazingly, I still play a little bit of World of Warcraft, although not as much as I used to.
He's already maxed out, level 80. He's got all the enchanted weapons.
Oh, yeah.
Sandy, you got any for him?
I do have one, but I'm going to change it. The question was Nike or Adidas, but I'm going to ask him Nike or Under Armour.
Oh, interesting. Well, so for shoes, it would be Nike, obviously.
Yeah.
But for clothes, I do actually like Under Armour.
That's why I asked.
I'm a big agreement with you. I think Under Armour just fits better, forms better.
It does.
And their sweat wick.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
It's so much better.
But shoes, Nike's better.
But I think it also starts because Under Armour was designed to be like athletic first with the football teams, right, in Maryland.
Right.
And so like they hyper focus on that. And then obviously you have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who does a pretty good job of that one.
They just fit better, and the fabric, for whatever reason, I just like it better.
Where do you go for peace and quiet?
Yeah, the racetrack counts for sure, but obviously that's not quiet, right? So I'd say we've got some places out in Leavenworth that are really quiet and just serene. You're kind of out there in nature.
I love that.
It's just a nice place to go and just chill for even just a weekend. Really like that.
Favorite book?
I'm going to say a short history of nearly everything. Bill Bryson. This is
nice.
The reason I like this book, or what makes it so great, and it's old. It's probably 20 years old or something like that.
So you can relate.
I can relate, yes. I don't know how
that
we
was
can.
to Sandy. That wasn't to our guest. For the audience listeners.
The thing that I really like about it, though, is it really kind of simplifies a lot of things in many fields of science that really is just approachable at a normal sort of reader level that's not too deep.
All right, last question. A brand that's killing it with email marketing.
Well, I'm going to name two for you, and they're both pretty new. So TLDR and 1440. And I think both of these guys started these email newsletters with the opinion or the thought that, hey, email is really kind of the killer app when it comes to doing all things.
Yeah.
It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Tons of infrastructure and apps support it. So it's really interesting, I think, to see the growth of those two newsletters in particular.
What I like what he just said too is the power of a newsletter.
Yes.
You've got a captive. You don't need to be like 100,000 subscribers or whatever. You can have 2,000. That's captive. And if they're subscribing to you, like they're going to stay up to date. But the importance is consistent frequency, right? And providing that out. Like I follow Stratechery, which is a strategy newsletter. He likes to do articles and whatnot. And then there's some other newsletters that I even created right on like leadership principles and whatnot that LinkedIn does also provide. So you don't have to have like your own email campaign, which is a pretty cool aspect there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I found myself using LinkedIn more and more over the past few years, and like less of the more consumery ones, the Facebooks of the world. So it seems like there's a shift over.
Professional journey. Let's talk about it.
So as Sandy mentioned, I'm CTO for a company that I started with a business partner about, I think we're 11 years in now, of Versium Analytics. On the surface, we help people with marketing. Typically from the data aspect, when we started, it was all about AI-based modeling and things like this. We've done a ton of work in that space. A little different from the generative AI that's kind of taking the world by storm right now, but what we do still works really well, and so we continue on that journey.
So with that said, did you ever, when you were growing up, did you know what a CTO was? Like, and then like analytics, am I like, how did this happen?
I love where you're going with that. So I now I got to rewind back to like
no, this is the whole reason.
Right?
I was like, what's where you are today, and then rewind back.
So I was that nerd kid in school, the one that got beat up and all that sort of stuff when I was, in grade school or what have you. not really, but the one that was
No,
poke fun.
I was the same way, and then that's why I worked out to fight back.
There you go. There you go.
And then they didn't pick on me anymore.
It made you a better person.
Yeah,
right?
I got stronger.
It didn't kill you. It made you stronger. That's right. So, as a kid, I was always just very interested in computers. My dad did a lot of work with satellite communication systems and things for the Department of Defense and whatnot. And he'd occasionally bring me into like a lab and just stick me in front of a computer.
So cool.
Really liked playing around on the keyboards, all this kind of stuff, but didn't know a whole lot about it. Then he would bring home this, it was a compact, they called it a portable computer. And by portable, it weighed probably 30 pounds.
I remember that one. It was like a suitcase.
Oh, yeah. It looked like a suit. It was a
Like
big
from the *Halt and
suitcase.
Catch Fire* series. Like, that's pretty cool.
Don't know that, but it's a big thing. It was heavy. It was, metal and all this kind of
Supposed
stuff.
to be portable.
Yeah, it was because it would,
It
go
had a
from...
handle.
It did have a handle.
That's all
right.
that makes it portable.
And so I actually learned how to program in BASIC. Yeah. And found that really fun. But I also was obviously into games, as a younger kid. And so the first computer that I personally got, I got a paper route to get it actually, was a Commodore 64.
Oh.
And yeah.
That was my first one too.
Was it really? What year was that?
That was probably mid-'80s.
Yeah, mid-'80s. The
Yeah.
same for me. Mid-'80s.
Maybe 86 or somewhere around 85, 86. But on the Commodore, I learned, it was just a fantastic thing for learning all sorts of stuff. Again, zillions of stories. But eventually, for one of my birthdays, I got a modem, a 300 baud modem. I didn't even know what it was. My dad's like, yeah, you'll like this. No idea what it is. Yeah. Okay. So, of course, the next thing I do is I start calling up other computers and did not realize how long distance calls were. So, yeah.
Some money was happening there.
Yeah, I'd say about a month later, it started to, started
Your
to
dad's
dial
like, what are you
that down.
doing?
He pulled the plug on it.
That's right. Eventually got a faster modem, 1200 baud, and it was able to do more stuff with video games and things. It was very exciting. But eventually after that, I was actually able to get a job working at one of the computer stores. So unlike today where you go online, click a couple buttons and say, yes, I want that computer, and it comes to you, we actually would put them together from the component level. And so I was very fortunate to find a local computer store that, was interested in hiring. I think at that time I was 16.
Nice.
16-year-old kids come in after school and do stuff. And I'm somewhat in touch with the guy there. He doesn't do that anymore. His name was Frank F. Tahi. Super, super cool guy. I listened to him on the phone negotiating. And, obviously after that, you'd go in the back, you'd start doing the actual, components, flip the jumpers or dip switches, all these kinds of things, build computers for people. And I had a really interesting moment in the process there. I don't remember the year off the top of my head, but there was this computer virus going around that was all over the news. It was called Michelangelo. And this Michelangelo virus was supposed to destroy all the software
computers.
on your computer on Michelangelo's birthday, which happened to be the 6th. And so we had people that would bring in computers that occasionally had viruses. And sure enough, one would come in occasionally that's got this Michelangelo virus. Wow, that's crazy. So I got a copy of it, and I went home, and I'm like, I'm taking this thing apart, and I'm going to figure out how to detect and get rid of this. So I wrote a little program to do. And
Self-taught.
yes, went in.
Self-motivated.
I'm 16 at the time, right?
This is so cool.
Went into the store, which was called, it's not around anymore, it was called the Byte Gallery, and told the boss, hey, I put this thing together. And so like any smart business owner, he's like, oh, that's really interesting. Quickly picks up the phone and calls all the news stations. Hey, we're giving away free copies of the Michelangelo detector and remover. And so I spent the next, couple of weeks copying floppy disks.
And you're giving it away for free.
Oh, yeah.
You
was
gave it
crazy.
away for free. Was the thing that if you buy a computer, what was the business model?
It just given away for free. They got lots of publicity out of it.
And did you get a lot of business from that afterwards?
Honestly, I don't know. I was just the guy building the computers in the back, so it was always
You know
busy
what
there.
was fascinating, what I just heard here, and this is again for everyone that's listening, is the importance of looking after the next generation and just giving them an opportunity.
Yep,
it could
absolutely.
it could seem little to us or such an afterthought, but like the impact that your dad had. We've had someone like Jan who was just on, and he said his like a second grade teacher reached out to him and says, hey, I've noticed you're pretty good at math. Why don't you try doing this stuff or whatever on Fortran?
Yeah.
And I'll punch it in, and then Jan ever since then was inspired. Right. And then, we had Tanmay, and he had.
Yeah. You want the early inspirations. And, sometimes kids may or may not have that break, but if they get it, it could put them on a totally different trajectory, which is awesome.
I completely agree. And actually, even at Versium, we bring interns in at the high school and collegiate level all the time. as a way to give back as well.
They're so eager to learn. And I think if you sometimes wait till college, they get all these bad habits or whatever. But as you start them younger, it's like, why not bring in apprenticeship programs again?
So there's a really interesting thing in here as well. I'm sure you've heard the quote, ignorance is bliss, right? So a lot of times you can get these experienced engineers that come in to try to build stuff. They know what you're allowed to do and what you're not supposed to do.
They
don't ask why not. They don't do the why not.
The kids don't know what's okay and what's not okay, and they're willing to try anything. And so actually, even
find new ways.
Even as an adult, when I'm looking at what they're doing, I learn from them just as they learn from me, and it's very symbiotic, I think, in that way.
Which is awesome. So then the other thing I liked was that you were giving the floppy disk away just to get publicity. It wasn't that worked. So give you a little bit of spark and entrepreneurship, negotiation, getting an opportunity early, marketing.
Just a tidbit.
Just a little bit, a taste. Then what's next?
Yeah, so after that, eventually, found my way off to college. The collegiate application process back then was a little bit different from today, but surprisingly, there was a school, UC Riverside, University of California, Riverside, which had just broken off the computer science department from the math department.
Okay.
And so it was relatively new, maybe a few years in at the time, and they were willing to accept me with my not very exciting GPA.
Amen to that. Sandy, what was your GPA?
We don't have GPA in India, but the equivalent would have been about 3.7, 3.8.
Show off. Guess. And yours was?
Probably like 3.1 or 3.2.
All right, so I was at 2.7.
Okay, well.
But I think what it shows you is like, Jan was even talking about like how a college just tells me you're able to finish something.
Yeah.
It doesn't show me, the domain expertise that I'm hiring for specifically.
I would agree with that. I actually, for the first year of college, it was like the computer science classes were more or less review of things that I already, learned or taught myself, etc. But the classes that were not in computer science, some of them I actually found interesting, especially physics, which I kind of already like.
Okay.
I'd extend that even to, some of the softer skills. Like I really enjoyed history. I mean, I just did. I didn't like it when I was in high school, but
enjoying it in college.
What are the big battles I want to go, learn about?
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. And somewhere in the back of my mind, you're like, okay, how does computer stuff apply to these industries? Like, well, you could archive it, you could look for stuff. Okay, I don't know. But now I think actually some of the biggest problems that are still waiting to be solved are actually not in the domain of computer stuff, but rather in these non-computery skills or non-engineering skills, but rather have the application of computers to them. So look at psychology. I've heard already people starting to use, chat bots for, act as my shrink or what have you. What if it's just monitoring everything going on and kind of gives you a mental health checkup based on the emails you send or texts you send?
What I love what you just said. That's one of the things that a lot of us suicide prevention apps or veteran help apps is. One of my friends created this app called Objective Zero.
Mm-hmm.
The goal was to get to like 0 suicides in veterans. It's unfortunately like 22 a day or some sad stat.
Not good.
And what they were using is they were using AI to monitor the messages that the veterans were sending to their other veterans within the app that they had built to detect. So let's say we were a group of 3 and I wasn't chatting to you guys. Something was off, right? It would send a friendly alert to both of you. Hey, you haven't heard from your friend in a while. Maybe you should check in because like there are some psychology like parameters that say if someone's not talking to you, something might be up because their normal behavior is to do it this way and in that way. And then it's just like the simple things of being like,
there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I love that.
So in the most broad sense, I think some of the really cool apps in the future actually come from sort of this, application of, let's just call it engineering in the most general sense, to non-engineering fields, right? Nonetheless, at school, interestingly, at college, 2 really interesting things happened. The first one was I found a professor that was nice enough, a guy named Tom Payne, who's now retired, but was nice enough to say, hey, here's a computer that you can use and set up a website, because this was in the very early 90s, and that was, the whole web was kind of coming to be. Now, interestingly, I grew up in San Diego, and before that, I had a relationship with some of the system administrators at UCSD. And so I had already been using the internet and, figured all that stuff out for a while. So that was it gave me, again, a little bit of a head start there. But as soon as the web started coming out, I started thinking about what are the interesting apps that we could put together there. And I put together an email directory. And the whole reason I did that is because I wanted to talk to people I went to high school with, but I had no idea how to get a hold of them. So I started writing literally like web crawler equivalents to go and try to find people online and find their email address and then bring that sort of stuff
Now I
back.
know where we're going after this. Keep going.
But there's a tangent that has nothing to do with that. And that is, I also was very interested in this whole antivirus thing because, I had just done this stuff with the Byte Gallery at the time.
Yeah.
And so I actually sent out emails to all of the different antivirus vendors at the time. It was about 20 of them. And I sent it out pretty early in the year. It was probably, let's call it, maybe October timeframe, something like that. I got no responses except for one from Symantec, which was the Peter Norton group. And all the message said was, yes, we occasionally hire interns. That was it. And I'm like, all right, fine, forget this. I'm going back to doing whatever it is I'm going to do. Some months went by, and then I got an email from the same guy who is actually now retired. I'm actually quite in touch with him, believe it or not. And he said, hey, are you still interested? If you are, we'd like to have you come down, this weekend and, look around and see if this is the place for you or whatever. I didn't realize that was like an interview, but, I went down, checked it out. I'm like, this is awesome. Right? I wanted to do that.
You went there thinking it was just a tour.
That's
but
what I
they
thought.
were interviewing you while you were there.
Nice.
I love that.
Well, what was nice about it is I got to be myself.
Totally informal. Totally casual. Yeah.
That's right. And so that was actually a really nice thing. And, I think even today when I look at people that come in, if they're, I don't want to say inappropriately dressed, but clearly putting a facade on, to me, it's actually a little bit of a turnoff because that's not what I'm going to see every day.
You are.
That's right. And I want to see who these people are. So that was amazing. They did give me an offer. I went down over the summer. And at the time, I don't remember what my salary was. It was like $12 an hour, $13 an hour, which, and minimum wage was maybe $6 an hour or something. So I'm like, yeah.
That's still really good.
Killing it.
Yeah. And it's actually, I want to go to your thoughts on interviewing because you've done a lot of interviews. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes people make? How about that? Like, what are the things that you think are simple things you could do to enhance, to be authentic? Because I have my opinion. I would like to hear yours, Sandy.
I would love to hear what Kevin has to say first.
So
go ahead.
I've got two big thoughts on that. So the first one is I do not like these sort of prototypical questions. So if a lot of people, when they're going to go to so you're going to go to an interview, you go study up on, there was a local, very large company in this area, not too far from us,
Microsoft.
which asked me that question. I'm not going to say who it is, but they asked me exactly that. Why do you want to work here? This
I hate that question.
This was, I don't know, around the year, 2000 or something like that. And I said, I don't really know. I was hoping that you guys would tell me why I want to work here. They did not like that answer.
But I love that answer.
I love that answer too, because that is the answer.
That was authentic.
They got very upset with me. That was a short interview after that. And then that told me the answer. That's not where I want to be.
Good call. That's number one. What's number two?
So the other thing is I like to take things that I'm working on currently and then ask them about it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that I do, especially as CTO, it's kind of an R&D
domain relevant to see if they understand this role.
That's right. Or can they figure out how to solve something? Because they didn't read about the problem that I'm working on. They didn't teach that to you in school. It's really a question of, can you apply all of the domain knowledge you have to solve a problem that hasn't been spelled out for you? I don't want you to give me a design pattern book and say, oh, page 34 answers your question.
You know what I like about what you just said? Is it prevents, it makes it equal playing field.
Yeah.
For anyone that actually has real experience.
And how are you thinking on your feet?
Thinking on your feet, not everyone, that's a little unfair because not everyone can deal, unfortunately, with that types of pressures and whatnot. You know what I mean? Like you and I might be, and maybe this role is not necessarily needing the extrovert salesman, or saleswoman. But what I like about this is if it's like that phrase, competence builds confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have competence in that field, it will show up. Right. And I like that a lot.
No, but he said part one and part two, I like both of them, but that's what you are providing as an environment. And that's what you prefer. Right. Which I like a lot. But what do you think are the mistakes interviewees do?
Yeah. So, well, aside from dressing up in a fake way or, obviously people come in, they're kind of nervous. So I try to appreciate that. I mean, you know this, right? But the biggest mistake would be that somebody spends too much time on a problem, like thinking they know it or they'll get it. And, 5 minutes goes by and they haven't done anything and they don't ask for help. And so that's also a giant red flag. Like spend, I'd say, 30 seconds on whatever your intuition tells you. The next 30 seconds writing down or implementing whatever that is. And if you get stuck, ask, right? If you're waiting 5 minutes, I thought I could do this.
I am smart enough, I'll do it, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, look, we need people that, again, these are problems that haven't necessarily been solved. So we need people that are willing to ask questions. It speaks a little bit to the humility of the person Because, you do find, especially at some of these larger companies, people that come in very pompous. Oh, I worked on, big thing X, big thing Y. It's like, we're a startup type environment. If you come in here and you've got, big company, oh, there's other people that solved that problem for me, may not get very far in our. So that's how
my peer reached out to me and says, hey, let's schedule a call in the morning. I'll give you some coaching. And they were like, they thought they dropped the ball. And I even told them, I said, actually, the fact that they're willing to spend time to coach you is a green flag. If people stop wanting to coach you,
it's a problem.
That means they don't think you're coachable. What are your thoughts on that?
Smiling.
I love what you just said. So I've got a fantastic story about this, actually. So there was a chap who was in Montana, which is, as you know, not the most, that's not where you're going to look for software engineers in general.
Well, it's also, I feel like just culturally, you have to be like your own tough individual there, right?
So this guy wanted to work very badly at one of my previous companies. And he came over to an interview, and I told him, I said, look, I really like your ambition here. Love your passion, and I love that you're asking questions. You're just not quite yet there. Here's what I'd suggest. And I actually gave him a book off my shelf and just said, take this, and pointed him at a couple of websites and said, go study up on this. And here's like a project. Go try to do, thing X with this technology and with these things. And he, okay, yeah, sure. Went away. I didn't hear from him for like 2-3 months. Then finally, he shoots me an email. I was like, hey, I think I'm ready now. I'm like, oh, I had forgotten about you. That's interesting. Why don't you come on out and let's see what's going on? In the back of my mind, I'm like, I just love that he got back to me after a couple of months of time. He did fantastic. We brought him in. He actually ran QA for us for quite.
Dude, love that.
Yes, and unfortunately, he passed away. He had a kidney issue. But as far as like being inspirational for hey, if you don't get it on that first pass, ask for the feedback. What should I be looking at if I want this? Because a lot of times, especially today, there are so many different, technologies, things you can, really dive down into, become a super expert in one area and know nothing about something that's kind of related to it. This really, again, speaks to, do you learn? Are you willing to take some risks? Are you willing to risk on yourself? So really important things. And at the end of the day, do you come back and follow through? And that was amazing. And so
tell us about some
my interviews
soft
ever,
skills.
my favorite one.
Some other soft skills
super important
that you appreciate. Which ones?
So I like people that can translate from my hostile style.
I'm not sensing it, but we'll stay with that.
For myself, I like people who are able to sort of strafe that line.
Everything that happens in all our relationships is how you're making other people feel and think, right? Which is the truth. Business relationships or personal relationships. And the funny part is thinking and feeling, there's no logic there.
People remember how you make them feel.
Yeah, so but you might be wanting to make people feel okay because you like to receive clear, blunt messages, and maybe the other side does not. So putting yourself in their shoes also doesn't work. Think about it for a minute, right? So you actually have to get to know that human psychology. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And sometimes openly asking that. It's a very simple phrase, but we don't actually ask. So I think there is sometimes this is the so that's where I think.
Sandy, let the guy.
I know you're
jumping at the bit here.
Let me finish this thought though. I think that the craziness in this is that we do it in our professional world when we have to, because folks like you are into brilliant marketing, right? Doing sentiment analysis, doing all of that, and building models around it. How do we bring it into our behavior? I mean, it's just.
Yes. So for myself, and I'm sure that if you went back and you talked to anybody that I worked with, let's say 20 years ago, they'd say that I was not a pleasant person to work with, right? Very obstinate, very set in my ways, all these kinds of things, right? And I was lucky enough to have one of the people I was working with said, Kevin, you're really good at doing all these things, but the packaging is going to limit you. You're going to have to look at that and think about that. And for whatever reason, I trusted this person. And so I did actually give it some thought, and I'm like, what can you do about that? Like, this is just how I am.
Is it?
And I have to recommend another book. This one I had on audiobook. I don't have the printed version, but there is a hilariously titled book called How to Make Someone Like You in 90 Seconds or Less. It is by a guy named Nicholas Boothman. This
takes Dale Carnegie to another level. 90 seconds.
I wouldn't call it, it's not the same as How to Win Friends and Influence People, but it is really interesting. And I gave it, I probably listened to it, every day on the drive in and drive back home for probably a month, and just tried brainwashing myself. And I would pick like one little lesson and experiment while I was in the office. It actually worked relatively well. And so I think that did help sort of simmer some of me down a little bit. And the fact of the matter is, again, if you come across as brash, to somebody that doesn't like that, you're not going
to give response back.
So figure out who it is you're talking to, how they, what are the things that they care about, and speak to them in their language. And I think you'll get a better response. Yeah. And so for me, I conscientiously have to do that. Like, it doesn't come naturally to me. So that's something for me that I really have to work on in order to do that. And for sure, stuff still slips out from time to time. But
let's go back to your professional path. We were crawling directories.
Yes. Yeah, well, then I mentioned Symantec. Hey, we do finally, breaks people. And I went in there. It was really interesting. The first summer that I was actually at Symantec, again working on Norton antivirus, it was all essentially manual work in the worst possible way. So floppy disks were a thing, and what we would do is we would literally there was a disk that you'd get, and hey, there are maybe some viruses on this. Like, it was given to us by company X or what have you. And you'd poke it into a computer and you'd try to figure out, is there something there? And try to make it replicate. And then if it did, which sometimes it would, lots and lots of issues back then how do you detect it and how do you remove it?
Yeah, because it's now maybe infected.
That's right.
And these machines were off the network? Was it?
Lots of hilarious stories on that. So there were 4 different networks at that time, and one of them was, the corporate net. One of them was called AVNet, which was where you put all of the virus stuff. Nonetheless, so the first year I'm there, I'm doing all this literal manual label, hawking disks back and forth and, trying to replicate these things. Sometimes you just couldn't. Sometimes they crash all the time, all this sort of stuff. The second year, though, was actually quite exciting, because then what I did is I started writing the tools that automated what I was doing in that manual labor. There were so obviously you can't replicate putting a floppy in so well, but as far as the software aspect of it, you could. And so at the time, there was a project called DOS EMU that ran on Linux, and it was a DOS emulator. And no VMs at this time, but it was fantastic for doing this, because if it crashed, I didn't care. I would just copy a new image over, a new disk image basically over, and I could start again. And so aside from writing the individual tools within DOS itself to do some of this analysis.
Did you have enough memory on those computers?
I think we had like 8 megs on that.
But yeah. Can you even imagine that? 4 megs was a lot.
It was a lot way back. It actually is still a lot. It's just we abuse this stuff today. But so again, wrote these tools to do it, and then started automating this process around it in Linux, so we could just dump files in a directory and it would just turn on them on a machine. It was super great. Obviously, it couldn't do everything, so it would sieve them into, these ones are done, these ones I don't know. And then the ones that you don't know, those were always the hard ones, and those were the ones that you'd have to have the human actually go look at. Third year, I brought in a team of students, 5 of them actually.
Make them do the manual ones.
That was exactly what we did. And it was great. They were feeding us all pizzas, and it was a great time.
Now this is Mechanical Turk. That's what we were talking about.
Almost.
Way back then.
Almost. At the end, this was actually shocking to me. Finally I'm getting ready to finish up school, and I'm like, do you guys have something for me? Like, this is great. I'd love to keep doing this. And they offered me a position in networks. There was in a totally different area, not working on this antivirus stuff. And I'm like, I just don't want to work on network stuff.
Yeah.
That's not my thing. And so it was very, very painful, but I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I don't want to do that. That's not my interest. Chatted with some of the other guys, obviously McAfee popped up at one point in time. But if you recall, I mentioned I had also this sort of, internet-y search around and find people's emails. And so I was looking at that as like, maybe this is something, because as it turns out, we had a couple of VCs that also came to the university who had seen this, because there were magazine articles all over the place talking about this, because there were not a lot of places you could go to find people on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they came to school, they're like, hey, we'll write you a check, go do all these things. And it was really painful again, because in this case, I'm talking to him and I go, look, all the technical stuff, I got no problem with that. But you're asking me questions of like business things, and I'm not a business guy. I don't know how to do that. And it was really interesting what they said to me, and again, not expecting it, but they said to me is, the reason we're giving you this money is so you can identify the person that will take care of those things, and you can hire them. And I'm like, I don't even know how to find that person. Like, how am I going to be a judge of whether or not this is the right person or not? And you know exactly where I'm going.
Keep going. So, I love it.
At some point, I started just reaching out to the people that had sort of these online people finder things. There were a whole bunch of them at the time. I don't remember all of their names. There was a Bigfoot, a Whoware, Infospace, a whole bunch of these things. And the guy from Infospace, eventually I connected with him. And he's like, hey, I'd love to meet with you. Let's set something up. And so I'm like, all right, fine. I flew up there and, I met with him in a hotel lobby at like 8 p.m. And I was not particularly pleased with him at the time when I first got there. So we had some words with each other, if you will. And then after about 5 minutes of words, then it turned to, so what's the future? Where are you going? What are you going to do? What are you going to do with all this? And I'm like, I don't know. You tell me, like, what are you doing? Right? And so we're going back and forth. And it was funny because my girlfriend, now wife, also lived in the Bay Area. And so maybe around midnight or so, she came by to pick me up. And we're like, hey, come join the party. We're having a good old time.
You still
here.
at it for 4 hours?
Oh, yeah. Actually,
keep going.
We were at it even longer than that. So we ordered pizza, and I think it was around 6 a.m. that we ended up leaving from his hotel room, actually, with signed offer letter in hand. And lo and behold, I'm moving to Seattle, sight unseen, don't know anything about anything going on.
What month of the year was that?
It was probably like June.
It was time. Was it June gloom or was it a nice day?
No, it was June of 96. So I remember when we flew in, just looking out the window and thinking, wow, it's so lush and beautiful here. Yes.
Yeah, that's summertime.
Yeah.
Interview weather.
That's right. Now, here's the next funny part, though, is after getting up here, obviously we go into a hotel.
Yeah.
But there was a giant Microsoft conference in town. So the hotel was good for 2 days. And then that was it, because then all the rooms were gone. And it was like, uh-oh.
Where are we going to go now?
Slept on the floor a couple of times.
So 96 is when you moved up to Seattle.
That's right.
So tell us about that run.
Yeah. So again, as you know in particular, this was to join a company called InfoSpace. It had really just kind of started up, and
with the VC money?
No.
So you passed up on that?
Yeah, actually, I gave it back to him, believe it or not. And decided I was going to go join
this guy's thing.
Fledgling startup. Yeah. And the reason, quite frankly, as I mentioned, this guy, Naveen Jain, he had all sorts of technical skills, but also it was clear from talking to him, he also had a lot of these business skills. And ironically, after I had joined, I had the VCs actually come up and talk to him. So they actually came into our office and, hey, what's going on? I remember you. And when they were walking down the stairs, a guy named Jerry Gorman, he turns around and he looks at me. He got to the bottom of the stairs. He turned around and he says, Kevin, now I know why you joined this. And then he left.
Validating.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, good. So first couple of years, they were really rough. There was not a whole lot of infrastructure for internet stuff. So we built from the ground up. We built web server, we built our ad server, we built all the infrastructure for doing this. And ironically, this was actually all on Windows. So most of my experience was actually in the
Linux and others.
Yeah, Linux, FreeBSD, these kinds of things, and Unix style systems. So there was another learning curve there, some of which I liked, some of which I didn't. Like at the time, Visual Studio, like I'd never used that before, and man, it was good, right? And so I was like, wow, I just want to develop for this because it's so pleasant to use this system as opposed to coding in VI. Mind you, today, any coding I do in MV again.
Get back to the basics.
That's right, back to the basics.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, so I went there and lots of really interesting learnings there. And I would do the same, as I mentioned, with Frank Aftahi. I sat down next to Naveen at, probably about 3 o'clock each day, and I'd just listen to him on the phone. He'd be sitting in his chair. I'd be sitting right next to him. Nobody knew I was there. And I just listened to him talking on the phone, and I could hear
absorbing it.
That's right. And I could hear what the other person was saying. And afterwards, I'd ask him, why did you do that? Why didn't you ask this? Why did you say this? Why didn't you ask for more here? And it was just fascinating getting answers to all these things. So in some ways, it was kind of crash course in really business school, but a crash course in how business works, because I just didn't know.
Has curiosity been kind of a big thing? Is that what's always driven you? What is it?
That's a good question. Sort of, but so it's a big part of it. So I struggle getting really excited about things unless I can kind of immerse myself into it, right?
Yeah.
So when somebody's like, hey, here's the new cool, thing of the day, a lot of times I'll look at it and I'll say, that's actually the thing of yesterday with a different package on it. It's really the same thing. The core algorithms, the core things that are sitting underneath it, it's the same stuff. There's nothing new here. And I've got a whole bunch of thoughts on that in particular, but
on cryptocurrency.
Love crypto. we can come back. That's a whole thing.
We're gonna do a whole other podcast on it. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So the thing that was really just, again, interesting there was learning a lot about it, and it became interesting to me where I wanted to do more. And actually, the guy who I started Versium with, he was also doing business development then, and he was obviously much younger, as was I. And I asked him also, hey, I want to try to cut some deals. Never done it before. And again, my skill is code, right? And so, I don't remember what it was. I think one was a deal through to syndicate horoscopes out to some site. And
my God.
It was like $1,000 a month or something. But I remember that was like the first one where somebody was saying they will pay us like $1,000 a month to get this content to put up on their website. And it was me that did the deal. Like I negotiated, obviously they helped.
It's like your first dollar.
Yeah. But what was really cool about it was, here it is. I've spent all my life coding. And now suddenly I've got somebody that says, I want to give you money to get some
to keep coding.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, that's not to keep coding, to do a business deal, right? And so that was really exciting. And I did one more after that, and then I kind of backed off. I'm like, I'm going to go back to coding. But it was really nice to kind of stick my feet in there. And it speaks again to sort of that really broadness that you need in order to be not just a good entrepreneur, but a lot of times you get these people coming out of engineering schools and they are so myopic in terms of what they think the world is. It's all engineering to them. And they don't think about anything outside of that or these other fields, which, again, I'm convinced that's where most of the neat advances come in the future.
So your passion, and we're going to come to Versium in a minute, or talk more about Versium and what you're doing there in the future. Your passion for technology is obvious, right? But is it deeper around that? Like, are there other things around that passion? Like, what is it?
Do you mean deeper in tech or deeper in other fields?
You tell me.
So, I have a lot about... So tech is for sure, the number one thing, but there are other areas that I get interested in.
Well, I think it's where your passions have translated over to the purpose and the superpower of success that you've had.
That's where we'll want to end.
That's where you want to go. So that's what I think he meant, to help provide some guardrails for you.
Well, thank you.
So structure your serendipity, sir.
So the interesting thing is, again, when I look at a lot of technologies I just mentioned, a lot of them I think are genuinely just repackaged versions of the exact same thing. It annoys me a lot. I don't like that. I like to find that thing that's genuinely like a new...
Pure and new.
And then I like to take that and make it something that you don't need a degree in order to understand. Same reason that I like that book I mentioned earlier, A Short History of
Dumb it down. Right.
I don't like to use the word dumb it down. I like to
simplify it.
Make it accessible.
Yeah.
That's how I like to think.
I like it's the Albert Einstein analogy where if you can't explain something at a 12-year-old's level of understanding, then you don't master that understanding of it.
So the beauty of that is, for me, I usually get like maybe one or two good ideas a year. I mean, it's not like there's like zillions of things that I got to sift through it. It's most of them I just say no. I'm sure you've heard the Warren Buffett comment, right? Most people say no to most things, and I'm one of those people. And it takes a long time before I really decide that something is interesting enough to start applying to that focus.
Yeah.
But once that happens, to me, it's relentless, and I just focus on it day and night, and it just happens. I don't know how to describe it other than that's just my personality.
It just sucks you in.
Yeah, and you get so ingrained that I just go super deep on these things, right? Crypto was one of those back in the early days. I started that in 2000. So
wait,
we're going to come back to that.
We'll come back.
How much Bitcoin do you have back from him?
Not that much. You'd be surprised. I've got all sorts.
He bailed on it. Okay.
I would mine and sell. That's been my modus.
Perfect.
But the aside that I want to talk about is actually a little bit different. It's astrophotography. The reason that I think it's interesting is because photography by its nature implies art. And there's a huge part of art in astrophotography. You see these pictures from, space telescopes and stuff. You're like, wow, that's amazing. You can still do pretty amazing stuff even down here at the ground. And luckily we have cameras and, enough computer things and whatnot that it's relatively affordable. I mean, it costs $3,000 to do a good job. But the level of technical detail, precision, and processing of images and all these things, it is outrageously complicated. Like, you have no idea. I mean, you'll get down to talking about what is the overall sensitivity of the chip that's picking up the photons coming in, and how many can each of those buckets count up to before it, let's say, overflows or stops counting. And you have to consider all of these things based on the thing it is that you want to image, because not all cameras and not all telescopes can actually be good for doing the same type of thing. You want a picture of a planet, you get a webcam.
So this is your physics and computer science background.
Oh, yeah.
And it overlap in there?
Dude, I wanted to be an astronomer, an astrophysicist for a while, and then I realized I didn't like math that much and that there's no money in it. So
I think it was the latter, but it's okay.
It's both. But the level of technical prowess to do a really good job there is actually pretty crazy. You do need to go pretty deep. But again, at the end, you're producing a picture. And so you have a lot of leeway in terms of what is the artistic representation of the thing that you're producing. And that in itself is a really interesting way to combine, again, a technical thing with a soft thing.
let's talk about the superpower that you were starting to explore into. So we all have passions. There is some purpose that drives us, right? And as we pursue our path in professional careers and startups and entrepreneurship, we all have some superpowers. Have you ever thought about that? Have you explored it? What is it?
So there was a guy I worked with. He used to talk about that regularly. What's your superpower? He would ask people straight up. So mine, I think, is being able to do what I just described. Take these really complicated things and kind of whittle them down into like, what does somebody actually want or care about? And I'll give you an example from Versium. So when Versium first started, one of the things that we did on the modeling side was actually fraud detection. So can I look at, a stream of transactions or, a flow that ends up resulting in a transaction and determine which ones are fraudulent or not, right?
Okay.
And so by itself, that's really all somebody cares about. Which ones are bad, which ones are good.
Are we talking about credit card transactions? What are we talking about here?
This was for credit card transactions.
Okay.
Yeah. But in theory, it should apply to anything. So we had decided to go to a conference where we were going to demonstrate this. And literally 2 weeks before, we're already set up to go to the conference. We, got our booth and all this sort of stuff going on. And I'm like, what are we going to show? This is just an API. Like, I'm not going to sit there and poke things into a web browser and be like, hey, look, it said this one's bad. Like, this is going to make the worst demo possible.
Yeah.
And so we went back. You're like, you got 2 weeks to put something up that somebody can look at, right? And so really, it was, what are the important things? Well, somebody wants to say, how much fraud do I have? How much is being, pulled out? We actually started with a slider bar where we could adjust, like, what do I want
as acceptable level of fraud?
Yeah, what's the acceptable
risk? It's the acceptable level of risk because, like in security, I learned you could be super secure, but then you start blocking and preventing business.
You can't do business.
That's right.
So it's like, what is that risk tolerance score that you have?
That's right. So we whipped that up literally in 2 weeks, and it was just a website that's a UI that sat on top of.
But that was showcasing the back end power that you had
and the simplicity of telling the whole story. And
that's right. Yeah. So all my time was spent on this back end stuff. But again, you can't show.
You can't sell the back end. You need to because your buyers are
right.
The people are like, I don't need to know how this works. I just need to know what it does at the top.
Especially if it's just a service.
Yeah,
they're not buying the.
So what I'd say is, superpower is taking those complicated things, breaking them down into simple things. And I actually think, even though I've never had a title of sales engineer, I think it would be a fantastic.
Chief distillator. Chief distillator. That is what you're good at. You're great at distilling.
Now we're talking bourbon, single malt,
or a chief deconstructor. Sure. There you go. Or what they call business hacking. You're really good at hacking things.
I would certainly say.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
So, okay.
You want to hear more about what Versium does?
Well, where's the name from? That's a cool name.
Start there.
It's funny. So people always ask, where's it from? And I'm like, do they like it or not like it? So I like it for a couple of reasons.
Okay. Well, I hope so. You've stuck with it for 12 years now, right?
We made it up. So ver, V-E-R, actually in Spanish is a verb, which is to see, right? Cium, or the I-U-M portion of that, the postfix in Latin is a little bit more of a strength.
Yeah.
So the idea was
to see.
We'll combine together. Strength and knowledge is actually where I was trying to go.
Yeah.
So that is kind of the amalgamation of where the word came from.
Beautiful.
The fact that it sort of sounds familiar to people, right? Is that Verizon? No, Versium, right? Sometimes I get some Verisums. I've heard some other strange.
Veritas.
Yeah. So again, that's sort of Latin root there.
Nice.
So that's the origin of it. And the idea, again, when we started, was we're producing models that should help inform you in your business processes in order to make better conversions, avoid fraud, things like this. So we're giving strength.
Let me ask you this then. Like, for people that are starting businesses, like, do you think they should over-index on the name of the company when they start? Or because now it's more about the product, right?
So you're talking probably to the wrong guy.
Yeah, because you're a product guy.
I look past packaging when I'm looking at something to say, is this interesting? Is it novel? Is it unique? Does it solve a problem?
What about you, Sadie?
Even though his 2 lessons were, you need better packaging, he still knows how to look past the package.
Well, you gentlemen.
So I'll tell you, I invested.
I'll companies probably
contradict you a little bit there.
Please.
See, a bad name can really spoil it, right? So for just the simplicity again in branding, you go talk to somebody at a cocktail party. Can they understand the name and can they just punch it in by themselves with memory later? That brand recall has huge value.
Yeah, but
today it's very hard though.
But is the name supposed to reflect what it does? I don't know about that because Yahoo,
how did you?
Doesn't have to be.
Yahoo's
But actually,
it's not really a word.
Yeah.
It's yet another hierarchical, ontological organization.
There's so many of those created after that.
And today, with the lack of domain name availability, you got people using the IOs or AIs or whatever. That's all fine and dandy. So what you're saying is true, but names are pretty easy to change, especially when you're small and nobody's heard of it, right? You can easily...
Facebook into Meta.
Not what I'd call a good name, but, okay, whatever. I get why...
But the little village in Italy is thrilled about it.
That's true. But the other thing is that the name of the company is one thing, but the products that the company spits out also have names. And so even if you pick kind of a crappy name, sometimes that can make it more memorable. Yeah. In fact, my favorite oldest son has started...
Your favorite oldest son?
Yes. Yeah. I have a favorite youngest son and a favorite daughter.
I see what you did.
We're not naming them here. Keep going, Kevin.
Yeah. But so my favorite youngest son, he recently started a business, and without getting into the details of it, he sent me some examples for the logo that he was thinking of using. And one of them, this is a crawl-related thing, and one of the ones that he sent to me, I'm not joking, it had the colors of a bee, so black and yellow, but it looked like a spider, not a bee. And I looked at it, and I'm like, that's great. Yeah. It's great because my first impression when I see the colors is it's a bee, but then I realize it's actually a spider that sits behind it. That's probably one of the best logos I've ever seen because it is so outrageously memorable, and it bothers me. It bothers me at a core level where
what if I look at?
Yes, it doesn't match with what I want. So now I'm going to remember that every time I see it, and I do.
People are very fearful of ChatGPT, generative AI replacing a lot of different types of jobs, and so it's like, where do we go today?
So I think of that in the same way that when I was not the CTO, obviously I can be any organization, but when I was, the underling, I just think about that, and I actually had asked the question at Symantec. I'm like, I'm kind of automating what my job was, like. Yeah. You don't need me here next year, right? I've automated all this antivirus stuff. Mm-hmm. So, what's the deal with me? And the response actually that my boss at that time gave to me still rings true. And that was, well, then you'll move on to the next problem.
Say that. Do you really believe?
I do really.
By the way, I will say that too. In fact, I would say not just your own job, but even peer jobs. Because if you want to go up in the organization, you want to make yourself redundant.
Yes.
Yeah, because
it make yourself, and it takes a certain level of
that's really good because
security, and comfort that hey, I want to have 5 people who can do my job in their sleep.
Yes. You hear that?
You made that happen
as the virus and replicate that skill to everyone.
Sure. I was not thinking the virus analogy, but we'll go with
that's how I think of it because that was what I grew up doing, right?
Yeah.
So that was exactly how it worked. So when I brought in this team of interns there, it was you guys are all going to have to see how to do this, and it was my first taste of management in some way.
Yeah. There you go.
Which still don't.
You know what's funny is like, as an individual contributor, I've been somewhat held back with the basics of like the admin side, right? Like I was talking with Sandy's creative director recently about how someone with ADHD, the most basic task I struggle doing. It could be that email that needs to go out. That's just a recap, and I can do all the most complex strategy workshop sessions, bring the people together, the people organizer knowing like, okay, this customer wants this, so we'll bring this. But then the simple parts that are just like, file your expense report. Those destroy my...
So stay on that. Actually, this is very interesting. No, but that's actually very good. So hear me out.
What happened?
Is destroying him too, he's saying. So I find that lots of companies spend some time on the classic roles that should come together in a team. But the soft skills and the personality types are not woven in.
Yeah.
To build your dream team, you do by the need a little bit of this.
Yeah.
How do some of us process information and how our brain works? And hence, what is our best strength and where should we be positioned? So I think if all of us are trying to be in an environment where you're working in the strength and joy quadrant, things that I'm really good at and things I love. Because there could be things you're very good at, but you don't like them, you hate them.
Correct.
So for that, there is some interesting, in fact, he's applying a lot of AI and ML to this, that how do we create dream teams?
Yeah.
Because that's often ignored.
There's actually, there's a whole bunch of research.
Yeah.
One of the fascinating things that we did some years back, we don't use it today, but we actually took, you're going to laugh, the text that people use to describe themselves on LinkedIn. And at least at the time, there were about 5,000 or so that we found where they actually said what their Myers-Briggs type was.
Yeah.
On the LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn.
Why not?
Okay.
And as you would imagine, there were a lot more E's than I's, but
Makes sense why on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, you kind of gave it away.
that's right. So it was kind of a biased data set, but we used that then to start making word associations just with n-grams.
I love that.
To make word associations to these specific types, and then tried to use that to project onto the profiles that didn't have a specific type to see how do they fit, what type of job roles do they end up in. It was just internal study. Again, we didn't give this to anybody, but it was really interesting to go through and simply say, we can make predictions of people's personality types. And if you have data that says, hey, this person needs to work with a person of this type, which then you can start pairing those people together. A lot of organizations even do that, and
they do it
internally, right? I think the military.
So I would love to hear kind of two things from a Versium point of view today, and other things you're exploring.
Sure.
So where are we going with this whole data journey, and how's the AI ML thing kind of?
So let me give sort of some background here. Right? So Versium, again, data analytics company.
What?
Yes. So most of what we do is, again, with a marketing.
So how does this relate to Adobe or Google?
So
marketing platform.
Yeah. So we would be kind of outside of that, and the information that you get from us will be used actually on those platforms. And so we integrate with them. And
so we're not competing.
No, you guys would probably really like us.
Complementary.
Yeah.
Love that.
So the output from our system typically is a custom audience that then would be uploaded to.
This is for targeting.
That's right, for targeting.
Okay.
So
what's the secret sauce? Tell us a little about it.
Sure. So there's a couple of different components. One, we bring in our own data. That data, historically speaking, has been more sort of, let's just call it commercially available. Some of it's public record, things of this nature. We bring that stuff together, and then we layer on top of that additional components. Maybe online activity, things of this nature.
B2B, B2C, both?
We do both. And we actually, this is fascinating. So we actually, originally when we started, we were just B2C. We had an OEM agreement with Microsoft and Dynamics, and they only wanted B2B. And we're like, all right, we're doing B2B. And somewhere along the lines, we had this COVID thing, and that actually turned out to be wonderful because we were able to combine the B2B and the B2C together to create a graph, which we call the B2B2C graph.
Okay, love that.
The value of that, which Mr. Google here will appreciate, is that is that we were able to take a consumer or a business identity and traverse to them in the other worlds. So, for example,
cool.
Sandy at Indigo Slate, let's say, I would be able to say, oh, that's also the same as Sandy123 at gmail.com. When you're surfing around on the web and you go buy something from Amazon, you're using Sandy123 at gmail.com. You're not using generally speaking, you're not using your Indigo Slate one. This makes B2B advertising very difficult because if I go and say, hey, I want to target this person, and I go into the Google cookie pool equivalent, you get no match. You're not there. But if I can make that association to the consumer identity, which is out there, now suddenly I know I'm targeting to the same person, right, or the same entity, but I'm using an identity that is not the one that I thought it was, right? I want to use the consumer identity, not the business identity in order to find them. So that's been a big part of our business.
And go deeper beyond the identity. What else do you know about people, and how can you help with the targeting?
Sure. So again, think demographic type things in your mind. But we'll build models that are typically done via somebody saying, here are people that bought my thing or did the action that I want them to do. Here's the list of people that didn't do that thing. And we're able to look at those and essentially sieve through to say, what are the traits, attributes, qualities of group one as compared with group two, as compared with just the U.S. population, let's say at large? Are there any things that stand out? As a great example, this was a little while ago, we did a project with a local carrier, not going to say who, and this particular carrier came to us and said, hey, can you tell us more about what's going on here? We went in and we did some analysis, and we came away and we're like, something is wrong with our system because it indexed really high for motorcycle enthusiasts. And this is a cell phone. And so I'm like,
what are we doing with this data set?
Yeah, why do motorcycle people care about cell phone? Can they even talk on the phone? I don't know. But it was really interesting because we brought that back, and we're pretty nervous about even showing that to them in the first place. And when they actually looked at it, they're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. And we're like, okay, explain that to me. And they're like, well, if you look at our ads, we have this, lady driving around on a motorcycle. So of course,
the association happened.
That's right. So the association happened. So that was one of those really interesting kind of early on things like, wow, it really does work, even when I don't think it is, right?
Patterns. Yeah.
That's right. Beyond that, we also do a lot of just, understand your segments better. What do they do? What are the things that are interesting to them? Can we tell you more about these people?
Could I give you a problem one of my customers is facing? And you tell me how you would help. Do you want to do that on the spot?
Fire away.
Okay. So we're working with an auto insurance company.
Okay.
And they only work through agents right now.
Okay.
So they don't have anything digital yet.
Sure.
They're putting their toe in the water in the digital world. And what they're trying to do is, hey, how do I use Google, social, all of those to target buyers who are digital buyers,
Sure.
want to do some self-serve.
Okay.
And then how do you, within that, build further segments and attract them? Now, demographically, since they're working with agents, it so happens that a lot of it is the aging population. And they've not been able to attract the younger millennials or the Gen Zs or any of those yet.
Okay.
But they're excellent at their service.
So
To the extent, and I'll tell you this, if you have a flat tire, the agent shows up at 10 p.m. to just fix it. That's how good they are.
seen commercials.
But there's actual, this is reality. They don't do commercials yet. Now, the reality is that those people will actually make you whole if you have a claim. So I love it from a point of view of purpose. There's a great organization that serves well and have 1,200 agents, but they haven't entered the digital era. What could you guys do there?
Sure. So just right off the bat, they obviously know who they're insuring, or is that
The insuring one,
by
they
the
know.
individual agent?
They know the insurers, they have that data.
Okay, so I would start there and just say, let me understand who are the types of people that are coming in here. I heard you mention the aging demographic.
Yep.
So that's super interesting straight up. You might be able to even take like a GIS style approach and say, what are some of the areas where the younger people are that maybe have the same types of cars that we're currently insuring? Maybe we can, maybe there's some appeal there.
Okay.
On a related note, we had done a study with another manufacturer of cars to say, what do the buyers look like? But not so much just that straight off the bat. It was, what other cars do these people own?
Nice.
Is the current stuff in their garage a predictor of whether or not they will take one of mine? And the answer was, we did find a particular make and model that was a very strong indicator of whether or not they'd buy this other manufacturer's car. So you could do something similar using just the data that they already have.
Nice.
Past that, now you're getting into a little bit more of the creative side.
Yeah.
The chat GPTs and all this are very interesting there. We just recently had done actually an experiment just with our own data on our own mailing list where we actually went through and said, hey, let's go and associate various traits to all of these people, build out individual segments. And what we'll do is our marketing team went and they had written up a standard, here's the subject line, here's the body of message that we want to send to these people. And we asked ChatGPT to rewrite that message, the body of it.
But different demographics or different persona types?
It was very, very cleverly constructed. We said using terms and concepts that resonate with and then the list of demographic attributes, people who like this. And we chose some pretty weird ones on purpose. Things like cooking or pets or even sports, right? Maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
So
it's really good for like mass marketing and emailing and making unique for each of the demographics, and then
with additional intelligence.
But let me even go one step further there. So my mom's a real estate agent, and I told her, Mom, you can even use it to start describing your listings for you.
Yes.
I remember, what was it? Auto Trader, I think, or CarMax. Auto Trader or CarMax. As you can imagine, they have thousands of new listings every day.
Yes.
And a lot of them though are pretty similar.
And they look cliche.
But they had to rewrite, what it does. And so, and they were manually writing these descriptions of the vehicles, the Ford F-150, red, blah, 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 blah. So, but a majority, like the 80% of it could be just auto-populated. And so once they uploaded something like a GPT-like solution that would generate the text for you, they ended up saving like 11,000 man-hours a year.
Pause on that. Running an agency here, and you work with agencies.
We love agents.
What does it do for them?
So again, the question is, what should those segments be?
Yeah.
What are the segments that are interesting if I want to go and have some rewrite there? And a lot of times you can do that segmentation based on some activity you've seen, or you can do what's called add secondary external data. Ooh, scary term there. Really what that is, hey, we'll pair your data with the data set that we have. We have a huge data platform. We actually, life data, but that huge data platform has lots and lots of additional attributes of activity associated with people that may be outside of whatever you're seeing from them online. So that really does help give you that 360-degree view. There's great data online, don't get it wrong, but as soon as you start bridging into some of the offline stuff and you combine that together, now you've got much more comprehensive data set. So the projections that you make out of it end up working better. And actually we did see in that test, we did a standard A/B test, nothing magic. We did see improvement on the individual segment.
Yeah.
And if I read to you one of these messages versus the generic,
this is great.
you'd be like, whoa. There was one, we didn't send this one, but it was fantastic on like people who like football. And, it started off with, hey, we can help you with your leads. We can do this stuff, very sort of
cliche. Yeah.
Right. Rewrite this for the football person was amazing. It was like, do you want to score a touchdown with your leads? We're going to help take you to the end zone. Here's how we'll make sure that all your, it was like, whoa, and you could really understand how that would potentially encourage more.
But what about when it comes to privacy? What about when it comes to how it could be easily used for negative influence?
Yeah. So anything could always be used for.
Oh, what a PC answer.
Well,
I'm kidding. I'm teasing you.
Wind you here. So you gotta be just on the surface. You can't just say, oh, it's bad. I mean, even if I put a gun right here, right? I mean,
yeah,
it does have a purpose.
Yeah.
But when I choose to shoot a person or you're going hunting with, very different, or self-defense for them. The same is true with data, right? You can use data for good or you can use it for bad. You can use a car for good. You can use a computer for
very
good.
true.
You can use anything either way. So at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to control the bad actors, but you can certainly make it so that
you can influence.
That's right, and not encourage them to be using services. So the other thing that you mentioned, though, it's really important, is privacy. So privacy is a very big deal. We have all sorts of states passing things. Obviously, Europe's got their own stuff. I know there was a federal one that we're trying to do, although I don't think it came through. When you look at privacy, though, it's very, very interesting because over time, that privacy, like what should privacy be? Where's the line drawn? It's a gray area and it moves over time.
Yeah.
If you go back 100, 150 years, there was an outhouse. There was not a specific one for whichever gender you use. There was one. And there probably wasn't a door on it either. And so you'd go in there and you'd do your business.
Roman baths, right? It was
all the same.
Everything was open.
There's a fun prototypical example that's also sometimes used with people. It's like, hey, if you're in your bedroom stark naked and you call up the radio station and they're broadcasting you, is that an invasion of your privacy? They're just broadcasting your voice if you're naked. Yeah. And what if they ask you, what are you wearing? Right? And so you start walking up, where's that line drawn? And it's ever changing. The funny thing is that you would think that technology would actually make it better. But what we've seen in a lot of places is that what it's done is it's just proliferated the amount of data that's out there. And and some people look at it and say, oh my gosh, that's much worse. There's another area that's very interesting, which comes to what I like to call, proxy identifier. So I'll give you a really basic example. I don't know I'm going to use the word sex. I don't know what your sex is. But if you tell me your name, I can make a guess.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right? Now,
James should be a clear giveaway.
It may not be. Sandy's not.
I can make a guess. And I can actually tell you how likely it is, at least in the U.S.
95% Anglo-Saxon truth.
My favorite is when it's Chris, right? Or I like to refer to them as bisexual names, right? Pat, these kind of things. SNL used to have a funny skit on the Pat.
Aaron is a very
and spelling makes a difference, right? Yeah. So you start looking at it and you're like, okay, I can start inferring that just from the person's name. But there are also states that are restricting the ability to access things like gender for all sorts of reasons. And I'm actually really nervous about where this all goes.
Where is it going?
Which is where you're asking. Right?
Yeah, like I saw Montana just ban TikTok. Or trying to.
I'll come back to that.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
But
we're going to come back to TikTok.
Yeah.
TikTok.
I'm kidding. The really interesting thing, though, is that marketers like us use that to improve targeting, to deliver relevant messages and optimize ROI, right? That's kind of what the name of the game is. If you start doing things that impinge on the ability to do that, or make it more difficult, or make it so I can't target now my bikini wax product, I'm not allowed to send that to just the women. I have to send it to everybody. My marketing costs go up and my ROI goes down.
Yeah.
So you actually, if you think about it, there's implicitly a major hit to businesses.
Well, this was the whole thing with the iPhone versus Facebook influence.
It could even impact things. I mean, we talk about inflation, maybe it's waning, but keep pushing this. You're actually kind of going backwards in terms of how marketing used to happen, where it was broadcast one message to everybody, and it really only ends up applying then to businesses that really want that sort of.
Then you're favoring businesses versus humanity is the argument others would make, right? What are we after?
There's a lot of different ways you could go after it, and ultimately, again, that privacy thing is a moving target based on
slider, like you had built.
It is a slider, and it changes over time. And so, what we do, because we work with people who have first-party data, is we're simply enhancing their understanding of
their own first-party data.
That's right. Enhancing the relationships that they have with those people.
Well, it's interesting because, so in China, what's privacy? Everyone has given up so much data because I talked to a friend that lived there and she's like, well, I get so much value though. They have everything. So everything's super targeted.
Sure.
But then like you said, it could be weaponized to like completely lock you down and shut you down and then social credit score and all this other crazy influential stuff. But I always like to joke that people, like you talk about risk tolerance, it's all about what the value tolerance is for consumer individual.
That's a lot. That's a lot of it. And again, it's very weird in the US because we also have big carve-outs. Like one of the big carve-outs is actually for politics, right? So if you want to talk about, charged discussions or getting angry because you got the email that you really didn't want from that guy you didn't want, a lot of times there are carve-outs there. You're still, even though we keep passing all these laws to say no more or robocalls and all this stuff.
But you just get the campaign.
I'm getting the campaign
from all the politicians.
And also, so I am getting more robo texts than ever before, and it is so painful.
So again, it's a gradient, and it changes from industry to industry. And I'll throw another one out there, right? Actually, this is a super interesting one. I love this topic.
Yeah, let's do it.
So
let's dive.
When you go and you apply for some form of credit, right? There's a process. It's called the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and it's very clear. Like, you must be able to tell the person why they are not getting credit. Now, that by itself is really interesting because some models do not do a good job of describing the reason why. Others, like tree-based things, they will tell you why. Hey, I went over here, went over here, went over here. You're not getting it because you ended up over here, and we don't work with those people in that bucket. So when we start talking about especially things coming out of neural nets, GPT and otherwise, right? They usually don't describe very well how they get.
That is a problem
because it's the black box, right?
So people will layer both of them together. They'll use both, right, in order to try to give reasons. But there's a really interesting thing that comes out of this, which is really what you want to do. And the U.S. has slowly been stepping away from this, and I have some personal issue with that, is you want to look at the use of the data, not the data itself, and then focus on here are the deemed good uses of
are the ethical issues on the data usage versus the data source.
Correct. And so right now we've slowly
however, Kevin, on that, if in the black box you're recommending certain things and they already have a built-in bias because of what you're doing in your black box and nobody else knows it, and it's a bias you have for monetary reasons or political alignment or whatever, then what you're doing with the data might seem good, but it's actually not because it's biased.
No,
So how do you...
This is actually the point I'm making, which is, so in the case of, let me come back to the credit score, right? So if you go do that and you use a neural net and it comes back and says, sorry, you can't do it.
Yeah.
The law in the FCRA is very clear. You've got to be able to tell them why. That's right. So now that's probably not the best approach for me for my model. So it actually forces you
to be better with your model.
Correct.
So on that subject, the 6 month that they're asking for right now for everybody to pause, not to produce more
AI.
No, because this debate, like Congress and other lawmakers need some time to at least think through what are the implications before this thing keeps evolving.
Do you have Brad Smith thoughts? Are you hanging out with him too?
What do you think? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I would say that I think it's going to converge to common answers.
Yeah.
In other words, I think if you keep playing it forward, there's like, you don't know everything, I don't know everything, you don't know everything. But there is something that comes to you that you're like, oh yeah, this is the best answer. There's nothing better than this being the answer. Eventually, I think those questions effectively are asked and answered. The only thing that can change at that point...
So you're just focusing on the outcome, the algorithm that remain a black box, it doesn't matter?
Not quite what I'm saying. Okay. What I'm trying to get at is that if you go fast forward 5 years, let's say, the questions that people are asking today, those questions will already have that canonical answer.
Okay.
It's kind of like
you'll have
2 + 2 = 4. So if someone always asks you, is 2 + 2 4, it'll say yes.
The experimentation will go away. Perfect example. Don't remember where I heard it, but it was in a book somewhere. And that was when they designed the 777, they didn't do test flights. Or maybe it was 750. I don't know. One of these. Some plane they made it. It was called 777. No test flights. They designed it on a computer. And then they built it. And they knew it would fly. And the reason they knew it would fly is because they had mastered the understanding of the science behind how you make something fly. So they didn't need to experiment anymore. They already knew all of those different components. I think we'll end up in a similar path with a lot of the AI stuff that's coming down, where we're still in that experimental stage. What's good? What's bad? What are the things that are coming out? But at some point, you're going to be, we've asked and answered all of these as good as can be. These are now this is now the new standard of stuff. Now, there's another really interesting part of this, though, which says, well, what if there's new data that comes in that trains and changes that answer? And I also go back, ironically, to the science, right? Science changes its answers when new data becomes available. So I'm pretty okay with that. And I think if you take that approach or that view, you kind of realize, all these really interesting things that maybe somebody does today, it's going to seem very common in a few years, and you're going to run out of ideas of things to ask. They'll all be asked.
You're kind of there already. Tell us a couple of predictions for the future.
Well,
that you
got one.
Tell me, outside of the marketing space you work in, any other space.
In the world of AR versus VR, I'm a big AR fan, really like AR. VR, not so much. I'd give
100%.
I think we agree with that.
Big thumbs down. Yeah. AR gets big thumbs up from me. I think there's a lot of really big sort of global challenges that the U.S. faces right now. I don't think we're necessarily hitting them up properly. I think there will be some brain drain out of the U.S., not necessarily to China, but to some maybe China-friendly countries, they'll call it. The whole climate change, everything's got to be green, all this kind of stuff.
Nuclear power all the way.
So I like nuke power. I actually like wind power all the same. I'm okay with wind power. I don't have a problem with that. And I'm not like a climate denier.
Wind power kills eagles, bud.
Okay.
But
go ahead. Finish it.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think the issue that we're seeing right now, and again, this is not a denier type of thing, but I think climate's changing all the time, and the planet's been here for a really I'm not saying we should go and be intentionally pollutive or anything like that. And hey, if we can do things in a clean way, all for it, we should do that.
Do it.
But I think that pendulum is way too far over.
Well,
I think some innovation comes out of that, but it also stifles a lot of competition.
Yeah.
So I think that pendulum is going to come back a little bit more, and we'll probably see at some point in the next, let's just say, decade. We'll start seeing a few more. Very good. We'll start seeing a few more studies come out that are convincing to say, hey, the U.S. is not going to solve this problem alone. There are lots of other countries, and fundamentally, we're actually inhibiting our ability to be competitive in that global market when we're losing it as a result. So let's find a better balance. A better balance.
Yeah, I mean, my big thing is this whole, the influence of plastics. Like, there's this floating island in
the Pacific.
Yeah, that's like 170.
It's got its own ecosystem.
Yeah, 170 million pounds or some crazy amount of pounds of plastic, and then as a result of the cycle of rain, it decomposes, goes up to the clouds, then goes over to the fields where the cows are, drops down. Yep. And now I think they said every human being, because of all the microplastics and forever plastics, the crazy thing is every week you consume about a credit card's worth of plastic. Some of the things that we like to talk about is because the demographics span a lot here on this. And there's a lot of people that are thinking about changing careers, going into analytics and going into marketing and or security and privacy. And I think you have some great influence there. So if people wanted to get into a company like Versium and in that field, do they need a 4-year college degree? If not, where and how do you think they can go about it?
So,
because not everyone can afford going into 4 years of debt.
Yeah. So I don't think, unless you're doing like genuine research in areas, I don't think a 4-year degree is needed for most things. I think you can be trained to do whatever those things are. There somewhere, I don't know, when I was growing up, it's like if you didn't go to college, you were
a bum.
That's right. And so that was like ingrained, not so much in my head. It's not like my dad was saying it, but like it was kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we got this sort of false sense of, hey, everybody's got to go to a research university and learn how to do research. And then they come out and they're like, wow,
what do you do now?
Yeah, I'm really glad I've got this research on my English degree. Where am I going to go and work there? And so there's a portion of work that I think does require, in-depth study. But as technologies move forward, a long time ago, I would write code in assembler. Then I wrote it in C. Then I wrote it in PHP. I shouldn't still use PHP. I like PHP. Right? So it keeps getting higher and higher level. And pretty soon, you don't even have to know how to code super well. You can have the computer code of
GitHub Pilot,
for example. Yeah. So my point is, like, some of those things are becoming easier and easier. And if you asked, say the generation before mine, they'd probably come out and say, oh, you got to know how the transistors work. I mean, at a very basic level, I could tell you, but I'm not designing circuit boards every time I write a program, right? So those things get encapsulated and people build on top of it. And I think it's just a changing thing. So if somebody says, hey, I want to get into analytics, absolutely, you're going to have to study some stats. You really need to be solid in. You've got to be able to work with data. You've got to be good with databases. You've got to be able to monkey with all that stuff. But it doesn't require you going...
What about those 12-week boot camps and stuff like that? Are those okay?
I think you need more than 12 weeks. So the best benefit out of college is that you spend 4 years, typically, focusing in on one particular domain. And I think that's actually the most important. The point that I'm getting to is that you get that 10,000 hours when you're in, it's basically 10 years, but you get a good chunk of that when you're in university, right? You come out, you've got maybe 5,000, let's say, and then you get the other 5,000 when you're first working, which is why a lot of times people that come out of universities aren't ready to hit the road running in their new gig. They spend, literally months getting up to speed and being, learning the systems and all these kinds of things. Oh, that's how it's really done, right? So I think that there's some truth to that. And again, unless you really want to be a researcher, which some people do, and that's fine. If you're just like, hey, I want to go start a company or go solve some problem or go immerse myself in something interesting, I don't think it's required. But I do think that sort of, again, maybe it's not quite 10,000, but you need to spend many thousands of hours in a field before you're going to make any sort of meaningful movement. Right?
Thank you.
So,
any closing plugs?
This is your time to shine and share anything that, maybe we haven't covered that you're like, hey, I'm also working in X, Y, and Z, and you can also help out there.
Great. So I've got a plug for you. So coming up from Versium. So as I mentioned, we do a lot of this data analytics.
Okay.
And because of that, and because we work with people with the first party data in particular, we've seen a lot of data from a lot of enterprises, and it's crappy, really crappy. So one of the things that we are introducing next, actually later this month, wait, no, we're not quite in May. So later, sometime in May, maybe early June, is a data cleansing platform that really goes through and addresses the types of issues that we've seen in people's data and brings it down to sort of the level that a marketer would be able to use it. No tech skill required. We will analyze files. We will tell you what is wrong with them. We will tell you what we can do to fix it. If you have missing values that would require an append, we can take care of that. And if you have basic formattings of things that need to be corrected or in some way manipulated so that it can be normal.
That's pretty cool.
That also comes up. That we are working with a large cloud provider in the area that will also be disseminating this via API. So if you don't want to go and use a pretty UI that we've got for you,
use the backend.
You can go in and that's right. You can use the backend API. At the time that data is collected very, very easily. Some of the routines are kind of, I'd call them table stakes. Like, hey, is this really a phone number? That's a pretty basic thing. Even an incompetent engineer can solve that problem. Some of them get extremely complicated. If I'll pick on LinkedIn again for a moment. If you take LinkedIn, just in the US, there are over 1 million distinct titles that people have poked in. I'm the chief poobah and Mickey Mouse, right? All sorts of crazy things.
Business hacking expert. Yeah.
So we have models that standardize those types of things into, hey, here's one of 500 titles that you
that might apply.
That's right, that might apply. So lots of these types of things. even with locations that are maybe confusing. Oh yeah, I live in the Big Apple. We'll help you. Hey, that's really New York, right? It really
nice.
Really help clean this data up before it lands in the database, which has the net effect of improving your ability to use that data, and therefore.
I mean, I just hear it's not going to be reliable because it's not on Google.
Well,
that's all I heard. That's all I heard.
Hey, actually, it's funny because it's funny you say that. So one of the integrations. Hang on. One of the integrations is actually with Google Sheets. And so the way that works is you can actually call functions that do this data manipulation directly inside Google Sheets.
That's so smart.
Yes, and we should chat more on it.
We will. Well, I'll get your contact. I know people. Is there any other? So that's professional. Is there any other personal things that you're maybe thinking about that others like? I don't know, like Sandy, you've got
like philanthropy, anything?
Yeah. So one of the
other interests.
Yeah. So my wife is very.
Do you have a GoFundMe? You need people to put some money to.
But one of the ways that I give back is, I'm on the advisory board for UC Riverside as well, and I'll periodically give talks to the student body there, usually on entrepreneurialism. They typically reach back, and we do give them opportunities.
I love that. Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
I'm your host, James.
I'm your host, Sandy Sharma. Thank you for being here, Kevin. It was awesome.
Kevin.
We're going to add back again.
Like you, Kevin.
Until next time.